trying to burn my fingers tweeting. So I'll be using the MCN2016 hashtag. Feel free to send questions there. My handle is Museum of Emily, and you can direct them right at me to ask during the Q&A in a few minutes. So without any further ado, Jackie.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about different strategies, basically, that you can use for evaluating visitor experiences with tech. Yeah, with technologies, just to help you make more informed decisions. And the one thing I wanted to point out first, before I get started, is this cartoon about get all the information you can, and we'll think about a use for it later. And the reason why I put that there is because don't do that. I'm going to be talking more about this, but what I really wanted to draw your attention to is some of the themes in the presentation about thinking really strategically about evaluation, kind of knowing what questions you want to ask and why you want to ask those questions, and also that you don't need to necessarily have large samples to make a big impact, and also the idea of employing an agile approach where there's a consistent feedback loop in place. So I'm going to go through some examples and share some of the strategies used, but also some overall findings here, just to kind of give you some different ideas. So the first thing is, I actually work with digital media quite a bit at MoMA, but the way we work together now is really different from how we worked together a few years ago even. So these photos are actually from a project in 2013 and 2014. Where the user testing actually came at the end of the whole design process. So we were looking at MoMA Audio Plus and the mobile site, and while it was really useful to collect feedback from visitors, it would have been better to do it either early or during the process. So the different strategies we used, we actually intercepted visitors in the galleries for short kind of little testing sessions, but we also invited visitors in for longer user testing sessions. Usually with those, we provided some kind of an incentive because they were usually 45 minutes to an hour long. And we used a talk aloud approach, kind of getting people to narrate their experience, ask questions while they were testing. And we used a combination of guided prompts, but an open exploration too, just to kind of get a feel of not only what they thought about it, but actually see what they were doing. So now, in the last about year and a half, we actually created this group called the Audience Advocates Group, which is made up of people from different departments like visitor services, digital media, curatorial membership, different programmers and designers all involved in the process. And this idea is that we can test while design is in process. So basically the way it works is that we meet every Tuesday. We talk about what's going to be tested, and this is basically because MoMA's website is in the process of being redesigned, and it's being done in-house. So it's just kind of going through this. We're doing like an agile approach to the evaluation along with the agile approach of their design. And so we collect usually data for 2 days, and I create a summary of it, and then we share back the next Tuesday. So like the testing is being done week to week. And that just can keep like the whole process flowing. And it's really great to have people from different departments in on it because everyone's involved in the process of collecting the data and can really come together and make informed decisions. And actually, it's great for the programmers and designers to actually see how people are using the technology rather than hearing from us. And I think it's really changed how this is being done, but also kind of like thinking within the institution on a whole too. Some of the strategies we've been doing, so you'll see the cards laid out in the one photo. We've been doing like a lot of user stories and card sorting. So for the bottom one, what we were doing for this one, we took the top 2 navigation tiers on the website, made them into cards, and then had users sort them into content categories that made sense for them, to name the categories, to give them a title where they would want to, where they would go to look for them, and then arrange them how they would want to see them on the homepage. And this gave a really good idea of how people go to search for information, but also how they would recognize it on our website. And it helped us to kind of, we're in the process of refining that too. We've also been doing user testing with digital prototypes, and this is mainly sometimes just do like really small features. So trying different ways for how visitors will close out a page, dealing with like streamlined design and seeing if how little can we get, like if we want to simplify, we want to make sure that people can still get an idea of how to use something. So how much can we pare it down without losing like the intuitive design of it? And yeah, just basically those kind of testings. So another kind of related to this, pretty much since I've worked there, we've been really interested in how visitors are using their own mobile devices at the museum, but as well, we have free audio, and we keep testing to see what the barriers are to people that are using their own devices to access our audio content, and trying to get the number down of how many audio devices we're giving out. And we've realized several different things. There's barriers such as like sometimes the Wi-Fi was an issue. At one point we didn't have charging stations, so now we have charging stations. Offering free earbuds is like another thing we realized. And also like because the battery life, we have so many international tourists that like the battery life is like something that people really don't want to use if they can keep their phones for something else. So we've come at this different ways. So one thing we did was we interviewed people as they were picking up audio devices, but also when they were returning them. We've randomly interviewed visitors who we've seen like using their own devices in the galleries, kind of getting a sense of like how they were using them and how they might like to be using them. One thing we did that was part of a larger study it was part of like a lobby study basically, and it had people from different departments. We flipped around where the audio desk is located with the information desk, because previously you would first come and see the audio desk when you came in. So we switched it so it was further back. And using the information desk as a place where we could kind of share that there is free Wi-Fi and you can get the app for free, and like there's audio content on the website and all this information to see if that would maybe change people's mind about at least trying it out. And I mean, some people still wanted to pick up an audio device, and if that was the case, they were just like redirected around the corner where the audio desk had moved. But a lot of people were really willing to try using their own device. It was just a matter of the information wasn't there. But the thing that we found out at that time was that even when people did decide they're going to try their own device with this, the Wi-Fi ended up being a barrier. So that was something else that needed to be worked on, because it wasn't such a great thing that people were very interested in using their own devices. But if you want them to do that, everything needs to be like working so that they can do it without having any issue. And just one more thing about that is that we have managed to decrease our number of audio devices over the last 5 years. But we also realize, again, that that's probably something we won't ever want to get rid of entirely, at least in the foreseeable future, because like I said, we do have a lot of first-time visitors, a lot of international visitors, and as well families. It's really hard for them to be sharing one phone to access audio content, so it's just so much easier for them to pick up devices for the family. Oops. Okay, so another kind of interesting thing, there was one point when people realized that like we have a lot of page turners at MoMA, and there was pretty much at least one in every exhibition and collection galleries. No one really knew why exactly they were there, other than to add a lot more content. There wasn't much rationale about like how they were set up, what content was on there, how they were labeled. They were all kind of labeled in different ways. So again, there was a team that went in, and we all did observations and interviewed people right at the site of each of the digital page turners. And what we basically found out, and it wasn't that surprising actually, I guess, but a lot of them are really underused. And it was very unclear in some cases that they were even page turners. There was one in particular in the design galleries that was hung on the wall like a work of art, and it had no label, and people would just walk by. And at one point, originally we were going to interview people who we saw kind of even look at it, but no one was even looking at it. So then I started pretty much bringing people over to it and asking, like, pointing it out, and there still wasn't obvious. So the ones in this one are actually from the Jacob Lawrence Migration Series exhibition. These were the ones that were really well used. Part of that because the content was really well thought out about. That it wasn't like a whole book, and it really added to like the exhibition on a whole, allowed people to research. There was also seating, so people could take their time. They didn't have to like stand or be leaning over something. And it was in an area that was like, some of them were put in really high trafficked areas or next to doorways, and there was no way people were going to stop. But this was actually like the space was kind of designed for it in a way, so it was really helpful. So again, for this thing, with the page turners, we realized that like placement, furnishings, content choices, and labeling all have an impact on whether people need it or not. And in general, you don't need to put all of your information into one exhibition. So this was something that a curator was extremely excited about, and he couldn't figure out why no one was really stopping to use it. And so we ended up doing a tracking study through the exhibition to see where people were putting their attention, but also interviews at this specific interactive. There's a couple of things that why it wasn't really used, and I'll share a little bit more about the other strategies we used, but the one thing is that this came directly at the end of the exhibition. And this was an exhibition that was very information heavy. There was lots of text, lots of architectural models, panels, other smaller interactives like TV screens, projected images. So, and a lot of people weren't even getting through the whole exhibition either. So by the time they got to this, I think they were kind of either like pretty much had exhibition fatigue and just really didn't feel like, interacting with this. And again, this one has so much research on it, but there was no seating, and it was right in the entrance of a doorway. And there was usually a security guard kind of stationed there, so it wasn't the most welcoming place we wanted to sit down and kind of go through the content on it. Another issue was that it was translated directly from French, so it wasn't the most intuitive in terms of being able to search for this. So again, I kind of think just the point is like really thinking about, it's not necessarily like cramming all the information you can into something, but thinking like what people might want to kind of add to their experience and how to make it as inviting as possible. Okay. So another example where we did some like formative testing was for an app activity with children. This was related to the MoMA Art Lab, which is a physical space at MoMA, where children, it's usually always based around a theme. So like right now, like places and spaces, that type of thing. But at this time, there was also an app that had come out, and the activities were loosely like related to the actual physical space of the lab. And so we wanted to test some of the ideas with children in the space. And ideally, it would have been nice to maybe have like wireframes and have them set up on a device so children could test. But we didn't have the time because we needed to get the information back to the designers pretty quickly, and also the resources. It just would have been expensive. So we ended up doing paper testing with children, and there's a couple of things we found out about this. One, it was really great to actually test in the lab itself with kids because it just it was a more welcoming place, and it put them at ease, and they were already there to do activities. And also thinking about it as an activity or like play testing, and not making it seem like that it was like this an evaluation type thing. Another thing that was helpful is sometimes when I'm collecting data, I'll be like writing notes while I'm talking to someone. With children, we kind of just like chatted, and I kind of watched what they did, and then I took notes like after they had left, basically, just so it didn't put them like off or anything. And also it kind of took the pressure off parents, because parents tend to always want the children to like get it right, especially if they think it's some kind of an evaluation or test, and they kind of want to interject themselves. And I really just wanted to see, if kids were really bored with the activity. If they stopped interacting with it, that was good, because it gave us information like maybe we shouldn't go ahead with this activity. And so it kind of left the parents to do their own thing while we did this with the kids. One other complication about this actual evaluation, we needed children specifically who were ages 7 and up, and this was right before March break, I think, and it wasn't a time when that age group, it's not as frequent then. So there was like, kind of with any evaluation, especially when when you're looking for a specific sample or when you're observing, sometimes it requires like a lot of patience and a lot of waiting around. And one thing I always like to do with that, because it can feel like you're like wasting time, is to go through like data you already have and start trying to organize it in some ways, or even like photographing the space, kind of anything that you can do to kind of add to the report later on will be helpful. And this is an example of the actually like paper testing instrument that we use. So it's just a kind of like drawing activity. This actually was okay for the testing we were doing because we really just wanted to focus in on the clarity of the instructions and not so much about like the technology part of it, although that was like the thinking as well. And what we did realize too with this was that a lot of kids were talking about that they really wanted to be able to share what they made. So that was something that the app designers were kind of thinking about too, like how are we going to allow kids to like share what they make with this? They wanted more options, so like color choices. They also wanted to see examples of the artist's work. So even though it was like a paper test and we were looking at instructions, a lot of information came from the testing that allowed us to kind of add that into the app as well. So that's kind of something to always think about too. Even if you're asking one question, sometimes you'll get more information that you can still use, especially in terms of when it's like a technology. Okay. So one thing I'm actually in the middle of right now is testing this digital signage that has been put up around the museum just, I guess, a couple months ago. So a couple months ago, we just put ones in the lobby. There are 3 signs. You can see them on the bottom. More recently, we've put ones by the elevator banks as well. And we just wanted to see, were people using them? How were they using them? Was it the information that they were looking for, that kind of thing. So again, this was a team of us. It's a lobby task force team. They're really interested in all things in the lobby, like furnishings, and digital signage is one of them. We all took turns observing and interviewing visitors. And I was kind of surprised at what we ended up finding was that the first sign where you see on view with the directory, that's pretty much where visitors spent their time. The other 2 signs are kind of largely ignored. And visitors are really using it just as like a quick reference point to to kind of understand like where they want to start their visit and to get a sense of where specific artworks are located, or like a general sense of where art is, I guess, because there are images each floor, so it gives you some indication of what you might see. And it's really like not so much about wayfinding, but just like an idea of where to start and what's here, kind of. And it's great because international visitors, people who might not have English as a first language, it's also really accessible to them. What was interesting though was what the other 2 signs had on. They were rotating like highlights of different exhibitions in the museum, as well as things like a film series at MoMA's PS1 in Queens. And there was a few things we noticed about this. One, advertising. Even though like the MoMA PS1 is part of the MoMA brand, it was really confusing to visitors why we were advertising a film series, especially in this particular location when they really just wanted information to kind of plan out their visit at the 53rd Street address. So that was unclear why we were, and then people also got confused and thought the films were happening at MoMA, or like they thought some of the stuff was at our site and it was at MoMA PS1. So there was that. The other thing, the signs were being rotated, so people would sometimes like miss something and then wouldn't stick around to see it rotate again. So there was like a kind of like a timing issue. And then the highlights, and the highlights just weren't, for whatever reason, grabbing people. So now what we've decided to do is have the first 2 signs be the directory, but basically split it up. So one sign will be floors 1 to 3, and the other sign will be like 4 to 6. So that'll also help congestion in terms of like people crowding around that one sign, but also make it obviously the images and text will be bigger too, so it'll just be easier to see and grab more people. And then we're gonna start playing around with the rotation times too, to see like, is there kind of like a better time before the sign gets flipped? And thinking about, when is the appropriate time to share some information? So maybe since this is first when visitors get in, and there's like elevators, an escalator, and a staircase, like they really want to know, what do? I just got to MoMA. Maybe like that's not the greatest place to advertise MoMA PS1. Maybe that comes like, maybe that's in the lobby, or maybe that comes like later on in their like journey through the museum. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about like technology experiences at MoMA, different strategies around that, but I also kind of just wanted to think about the fact that visitors sometimes want tech-free experiences, and in fact, I think people use technology so much in their lives that museums are often, I think, a place where people go and sometimes want to put that aside. So maybe thinking of the museum as a place of reflection and connection and inspiration. So the top photo is actually from a printmaking workshop related to the Degas exhibition, and then the bottom one is from a thing we recently did called Quiet Mornings, where visitors would come into the galleries between 7:30 and 9:30. It was less crowded, and they could really like appreciate there. And then there was a guided meditation as well. And both of these are examples of why I think it's important to consider visitor experience before anything else. Like, what are you hoping visitors will experience? How do you want to engage with your visitors? What do visitors need that a museum might be able to offer them, but they aren't able to get in their own lives? I think there also is a tendency in museums to want to use the latest technology, but maybe thinking like, why do you want to use that particular technology first, and what are visitors going to get out of it? Because it's not automatically going to enhance their experience. What tech options are, I think it's often a catch-all for like, it does not fit any, like a little thought about the quality of experience or the ease of usability or the long-term outcomes and the cost implication around a certain technology. I think on all of this, it's good to lead with content basically. Consider your goals, values, and visitor outcomes. Factor in flexibility and long-term thinking, and then create the experience that meet those needs, not the other way around. Whether this is like choosing the right technology, because sometimes that is the case, or maybe foregoing technology in a particular instance. And then I just wanted to leave you, I guess, with questions to consider when planning an evaluation. Kind of like a takeaway, if you are thinking about evaluation, maybe going through some of these. What is it that you want to find out, and why do you want to find out those things? I think a lot of times people think they want to find out something, and then when they answer why, maybe that's not exactly what you are after all. What are you going to do with the information you gather? So again, like, don't gather everything like that original cartoon, but really thinking strategically, like, what information do you need? Is the data going to be actionable, and how willing are people to make changes? That's something else. Like, if you gather this data and it shows something needs to be changed, do you think it's a possibility that there will be changes made? And if it isn't, does it still make sense for you to collect it? And it might make sense, but just kind of asking like why and how much does it matter to you? Thinking about how much time you have. So again, I mentioned earlier on about, you don't always need large samples. And I know a lot of the stuff we're doing at MoMA sometimes are like these short samples or like really agile things just to kind of get a pulse of what's happening. So thinking about that too. When will the evaluation take place, and kind of roughing out a timeline? How much data do you need to collect? So what is your sample size again? Are there complementary sources of data you can look to? So there might be people in the museum already who have data, or maybe there's like an institution similar to you that has data, so kind of looking into that and sharing. What resources do you have? So are there other staff members who might be able to be involved? I know with us, like a lot of now people in visitor services, like a lot of frontline staff often want to be involved. So even if it's not a project directly affecting them, they may have interest in participating. And the strategies you're going to use, so are you going to do like prototype testing, user testing, interviews, observational? A lot of times we also collect emails from people if it's super busy, and then we'll send them like a follow-up survey just to also give them time to respond rather than interviewing them on the spot. So that's something else you can do. how will the data be used, who you're going to share it with, and what's the feedback loop like, so who are you going to have involved in the conversation, and then how will the findings be shared, like what format is it going to take. So I don't think it's always great to have like a large report. That's nice to have, and I think it's just something consistently done, but is there going to be like a PowerPoint that's presented at an some information meeting, or a word cloud, or like anything, just thinking about there might be different formats basically that you want to use in order to share the data. So that's it.